Well, hello everyone. Welcome to World at War Comics. I got two amazing guests, Morgan and Owen Rosenblum. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Man, creators extraordinaire. I would love to kind of dig into all the stuff that you guys have been working on. I don't even know how to express what you two do. I mean, creative geniuses. You guys help out a lot of other. I mean, just from what I've seen, man, it's pretty amazing the people that you're touching and the training and the experience that you're bringing to other creators to help them bring their creators forth. And then obviously you got quite a bit of stuff that you're doing on your own. But before we jump into all of that, how are you both doing?
No complaints, man. Great.
No complaints.
No
Really
complaint.
excited. Everything that's like kind of starting to come out now is like you mentioned, we have Ramgod as
Yeah,
one of our main titles, which we're going to be talking about pretty soon. And then we got some other stuff in the works that's all kind of coming out this summer. So it's going to be a big summer for us. We're pretty pumped.
that's so sweet.
For 2024.
In 2024 is the year of
Yeah,
the.
summer 2024. We got big dreams. Big dreams.
I love it. I love it. Well, before we get into some of those dreams, just for folks that maybe are not aware of you two, maybe we could go back, like way back. I would love to figure out like when in life these creative juices started happening in both of your lives and when you decided to come together to really execute on some of these things.
Absolutely. So I think we started Dark Rose unofficially like 12 years ago, right around then. And it was we had this first title called Treadwater, which I can go grab in a moment. That was like kind of our first comic or graphic novel. That it was a graphic novel, and there's 2 volumes of it. And we indie published that one ourselves. We launched it on a Kickstarter to kind of get, that was also I think right around when Kickstarter was like just starting ish, or like it maybe didn't just start, but it certainly wasn't as big as it is now. And we failed in our first Kickstarter. We had like too ambitious of a goal. So we spent, all this time like reaching out to friends and family and just people that like comics that we would find,
Yeah.
like being like, you got to check out our thing, our campaign. And
We didn't know how to navigate the platform, I think more so because it was new at that time. So like really, I don't think many people really knew how to do it. So we were figuring it out as we went.
we just weren't really ambitious with it. Like to complete the full book, it was going to cost us like an extra 50 grand. So that's what we set as our funding goal, but not having any built-in following or audience at all at the time. Like getting that, we got to like, I think 12,000, 15,000. And then the way Kickstarter works is if you don't hit your funding goal, you get none of it. So then we're like, okay, well, let's just relaunch it and hit up the same exact people again. With a much lower funding goal, and then worry about trying to complete the rest of it after that. So we did that, and then like going about that process and hitting up everyone again. They're like, oh, but I saw my card got charged. And I was like, no, that was just hold. Like it didn't get charged. I promise you, I'm not asking for money again for the same thing. It's like, we're just, first you don't succeed, try again. And like, we're big advocates of like fail forward kind of thing. So like use every single, failure as like a learning experience for you to get better at. And it's like the best lessons are usually the hardest ones. So we ran it again, and then we were successful the second time around. And then that kind of got the book finished. And from that, we were able to like go and raise additional money outside of that, like through angel investors or whatever. I hate even saying it that way because like we're not like a corporation. There's 3 of us. It's myself, Owen, and then Johnny, our other business partner. And the 3 of us Owen's my blood brother, and then Johnny is my brother from another.
Yeah.
He was like a childhood friend of mine. Like literally, I refer to him as my roommate with a W because our parents met in Lamaze class. So
Oh,
we
wow.
all together creating this stuff, and we're big, geeks and fans of comics and board games and video games and pretty much like anything in sci-fi, superhero, fantasy, horror. Like we love all that stuff. And we had always like I was an artist as a kid. Was always drawing. And Owen is like a really good like creative director, and he would always be like, no, now like give him a mask that like covers the ears but like pulls out slightly so it looks whatever. And so I would like draw a lot of the characters, and then that was like when I was a little kid. And then growing up, like I kind of got sidetracked and didn't know what I wanted to do in life. And then like in my mid to late 20s, I was like, I want to I want to go for this. And so that's when I brought like Treadwater to Owen and to Johnny and to my other co-writer on it, Nat Prinzi. And yeah, we started going. Then fast forward like 10 years, we've been creating this stuff now for a while. And we have several other series that have come out, and now it's really we're starting to get to a point where like we're hopefully going to like be a name where people like know us, or at least know the content, because we've been kind of referred to as like the best kept secret in the industry. I was like,
That's awesome.
anyway,
Now,
that's
growing up as growing up as kids, were there certain like maybe directors or creators or just certain IPs that you grew up with that kind of triggered this love and then wanting to do your own thing?
Good
There was
question.
one. I'll let you talk a little bit so that others
Yeah,
have.
so on that note, I mean, we were huge X-Men fans, I think, really. Like, and honestly, like Batman the animated series, I think is like God's gift to like us, to like any kind of like nerd who like loves that type of stuff. And I do. And like, I mean, honestly, we also love like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles growing up, and like everything from like the cartoon and like the video games to like the live action Jim Henson stuff. It was, I think, like things like that, and even Transformers and GI Joe, like Captain Planet. Like, I know it sounds like a little weird, but like all that type of
Yeah.
stuff, consuming it as kids, it just like one thing led into the other, and then we started like, reading Spawn and things like that, and just kind of consuming that culture. And we like would go to Midtown Comics all the time in Manhattan. We're city boys. We live in the city, and that was just like kind of, I don't know, holy ground for
Yeah.
us.
It was
So
like, honestly, like, some kids love like FAO Schwartz and like, Toys R Us. Like ours was like tickets to a comic store. Like that
That's
was
awesome.
what was cool for us. Like, and we would just like, I mean, I wasn't a great reader as a kid, and I just didn't like reading like traditional, like just text novels and stuff like that. So, the idea of when my dad introduced us to comics, he started getting us Spawn and X-Men right off the bat. And like, we really got into Wildcats as well. So like, there's so many different types of comics that inspired us throughout, but it goes even beyond comics and stuff too. Cause like, we listen to like Lord of the Rings audiobooks, like in the car all
Yeah.
the time.
Oh,
My
wow.
dad would like always play like the Silmarillion and stuff like that, which for
well,
anyone who does.
Morgan, give Dad credit. He does speak Elvish, like
Oh,
actually.
yeah, no,
I'm
that's
not
true.
even
He
kidding.
actually
He
does.
actually like recites Elvis poetry. Like, this is who we really like. Our fandom of this lore and this kind of culture really came from our dad. Honestly, we would even play like the original like Zelda and like all the type of stuff on like Nintendo and then Super Nintendo and things like
Final
that.
Fantasy,
Yeah,
like
and he would be like, we'd be like at a certain like inflection point in the game, and we'd be struggling, and he'd be like, "Go to sleep, boys. In the morning, you will have everything you need." And then like he would play it, and
till
he
5 in the morning.
get us past that stage, and then we would come back and we'd be like, "How'd you do it?" And he'd be like, "A magician never tells," kind of thing. So it
What
was
an amazing pattern, man.
yeah,
Yeah.
for
And
sure.
like he also does like really he's like a good voice actor. He doesn't do it professionally or anything like that, but he probably could.
Yeah.
And
He's
he's
like
really
he's like a
great.
hybrid of Robin Williams meets Steve Carell.
Oh, wow.
It's like if you were to
Like two
put
of my
those two
favorite
people
people ever,
together.
too.
Yeah, yeah, he looks like them too. So like it's kind of it's the full thing.
Yeah. So were you already at a young age, because of this influence, were you already starting to world build and create your own things that eventually turned into maybe Treadwater or some of these other IPs that you have finally come out with professionally?
Yeah, so we had this thing called Army Elite as a kid. That was like our first homegrown IP, which was like our team of, it was like our X-Men, but it was all it was like a combination of like tech based in and like some, genetic experiment mutation type stuff. So it was like it sat somewhere in between like a GI Joe, Dark Knight, Iron Man, and X-Men kind of thing. But then it was a little bit too generic superhero in like hindsight. So as we got older, when we started to sort of revisit it and start building like our first story together, we changed it to this thing called Treadwater, which was inspired by Army Elite. But then later on, what's cool is like in the story, we found a way to work Army Elite into like season 4 arc
Yeah.
storyline. So like Treadwater has 2 full graphic novels out right now. It's kind of like we like kind of paused on it simply because like we wanted to make other things, and we're all self-funding all this stuff. So it's and with no real following at the moment. So our goal is to like come back to Treadwater at some point, hopefully in the near future, and continue, because we have all of the story planned. Like, so everyone that is a fan of Treadwater and has read it has been like, when's the next one coming out? It's been so long. I saw you guys moved on to like other stuff. And we're like, trust me, we are coming back, but we have to make sure that we have more stuff out there to like to get fans into, and then, we can come back to things as we grow more successful, hopefully. So
Yeah. And as Morgan was kind of saying a little bit earlier, it's like marketing is a weakness for us, right? And it's kind of always been a weakness for us. But our main hobby and interest is in content creation. We like to build. So like builders build, right? And we are constantly in the background just making new content, making new IPs and stories and whatnot. And we find different mediums to tell these stories in. And like now we just want to get those stories in the hands of like readers and viewers and all types of stuff. And that's really what we're trying to do more so now than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, on that, piggybacking off what Owen just said, like when we say we do it, we adapt it into different mediums, right? So like this is one title that we did, which is Winds of New Sarah, our most recent one. And after we made this, we started getting like people hitting us up saying, "Oh, this needs to be a video game or a board game or both or whatever." And we're like, video games are really expensive to do it properly. We didn't know much about how to make a board game, but it was something that we were really interested in. So we started, Johnny was like the one that was really advocating for it. Like, let's turn Winds of Numasera into a board game. And so we built one, and it looked really good. Like, I'm sure the box looks nice, but the game itself looked like all the components looks fantastic. And we tested it, right? We started letting people play it at conventions and stuff. And everyone was like, it looks really good. And we're like, cool, how does it play? And they're like, not so great. And we were like, oh.
Yeah.
So listen though, right? Because we're big advocates of like listen to the fans and the players, the people that actually know this industry.
Yeah.
And
They know best. They always know.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the 80-20 rule, like, right? It's like the top 10 that love it, no matter what. And then the bottom 10 that hate it, no matter what, kind of remove those out, but like listen to the bulk 80, because you'll find consistencies in that. So we asked them like, what didn't you like about the game? Oh, not enough choices, too much luck, not enough strategy, kind of thing. So we were like, okay, we started working to develop it, to make it better. And we did that process where we just kind of made we like made a fix, tested it again, more fixes, tested it again.
A bunch of different iterations, basically.
Yeah, for like 5 years. Because we thought it was ready to go like after Alpha 1, like, you know, the first version where like we felt really good because it looked real good.
Right.
But
because like kind of like our strength initially is with like design more so. And like we understand, coming from kind of comics and graphic novels, and I come from video production, like we understand how to make things look and very nice and print on good quality stuff, and just have the presentation component look you know, A+. But in terms of the playability and the mechanics of building kind of a board game, we didn't know. And we figured this out. And I think it's funny because coming from dealing with comic and graphic novel fans, and we thought, you know, they can be tough critics. Oh, no. People in the board game space are way more cutthroat, and they will rip your thing to shreds if they don't think it's good. And we listen, you know, we like blunt, opinionated people, you know, but we're always like, hey, if you're going to rip something apart, give us a suggestion on how to improve it and do better.
Exactly.
And so we always would ask, and then, you know, one thing led to another, and we now are on what iteration of this now?
I don't know, like if it was like an alphabet, we're probably near Z at this point.
Yeah.
Or maybe we even like loop the alphabet where we have like double A, double B. Anyway, the point is that like we got to a point where we brought the game back to the same initial play testers that played it like on Alpha 1, and they're now like, holy crap, guys. Like, well done. Like, is this ready? Like, I mean, can I get this? Can I buy this now? So we have a Kickstarter coming out for the game this summer, and we're pretty pumped about that. And that, you know, it's coincidental because that overlaps with the same like launch date of Ramgod, which is the comic. Now we can kind of start talking about that. So
yeah, that's in July, right? Ramgod.
Yeah. And that's another series that like has been in the works for 5 years or something like that. Owen and I first pitched, I was at Heavy Metal as the managing editor and creative director at the time. Owen and I were working on Owen had the initial idea for Ramgod, wanting to make this cool.
This was like probably like peak COVID time, I want to say, when everyone was like hunkered down and we were just like looking for, you know, our own creative outlet, especially me. You know, everyone was wearing masks, and I was just like thinking about alternate realities and futures. And then I think Morgan was playing Cyberpunk 2077 at the time, and we just loved the cyberpunk genre. I think I had just watched Blade Runner 2049, and like it just synced up, and I was like, man, like cyberpunk is I feel like it's such an untapped and underutilized genre. And I was like, we should like make an IP and property and story relating to that and kind of set in that world. And then one thing led to another, and Morgan and I were just spitballing, and then kind of we created Ramgod, which was initially called Dangerous Games, and it was like this whole thing. And he worked at Heavy Metal at that time, so I was like, "What do you think about this?" And he's like, "Well, we got to expand X, Y, and Z." And then we worked on it, created our pitch package, and then pitched it to Heavy Metal, and then one thing. I'll let Morgan, you can take it over from here because
Wait, by the way, so like it was just for context, it was initially some people that had like especially like retailers and maybe some fans had maybe like, oh, I've heard about it. I remember that before.
Yeah.
It was initially supposed to come out through heavy metal. And this was around the time the company, you know, was like going through some stuff. I wasn't that high up where I was like privy to the information, but they had brought on Whatnot, which is Massive's, you know, sister company or umbrella company.
Parent company.
To partner with them, and Whatnot / Massive had looked at sort of the Rolodex of all of the different series and things like that that heavy metal had coming out, and they saw Ramgod. Like, what's this? This is cool. Like maybe this, and it was supposed to be in the magazine originally as like part of the serials, and then they saw it and they're like, this should get its own series. Like it needs to have like a spotlight. Would you guys be interested in like turning it into a comic series? We're like, yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it was supposed to launch last year, I think around February, March, right? And heavy metal, if I'm not mistaken, right? Was it 2023?
I think it was 2022, to be honest.
Okay.
It was initially supposed to be for 2021 and just getting bumped back for different reasons and stuff like that. Because we've had it ready for like a long time.
Yeah.
And our biggest thing is like we just wanted to tell the story and get it out.
Yeah.
So like
I like to refer to it honestly, like in a weird way, like as kind of as like a survivor story. Like everything that had happened with that company and kind of us taking the IP out of its hands and kind of controlling its own destiny, and then kind of partnering with Massive, which is, as we said, a subsidiary of Whatnot. It was like we both believed, I think, in the partnership and the story and the content so much that we just endured.
They believed in it too, which was really cool.
Yeah.
That was really
That's
good.
why it was a perfect partnership. It's like we kind of like it was like a phoenix emerging from the ashes. We were like, let's take this and let's still get this into fans, you know, hands. And we just kept bowling forward, you know, and it's coming out now finally.
So cool, man. Can you give us like a little bit of a synopsis of what fans could expect from Ramgod as far as I think I read somewhere you mentioned it is like a cyberpunk meets, what was it? You had a really good definition of Fast and the Furious, Point Break. Sorry, I don't know why I keep doing that. And then cyberpunk, right? Is that a pretty good kind of mash of what we could expect?
Yeah, it's got elements of Fast and the Furious meets like Tron to a degree.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty much what we did is the setting is in the future cyberpunk kind of vibe. It doesn't have anything to do with like the cyberpunk 2077 world at all. So like when we say cyberpunk, we mean the genre, not the
genre. Yeah.
Years. And it follows this cop named Clint Bowler, who's a former like superstar athlete that was supposed to go to the NFL, but he had like some he had a bit of a dark past and got involved with like a bad crowd that pretty much resulted in him getting a lifetime ban from the NFL because he was implicated with like ties to like the Chinese mob and things like that. So ultimately he like redirected his life, called in some favors, and kind of got in the straight and narrow, and has been working as a cop for the last 15 years. So now he's like in his 30s, you know, he's like 35 or something like that. And he's got a kid, a teenage kid, Malcolm, that's a huge fan of this new sport, right? That like, I remember when the UFC first came out and it wasn't like a big thing like it was now, but I was like pretty into that and stuff. And I thought it'd be kind of cool if like, what if we introduced our own sport, right? Owen and I were like, let's create our own sport. And then we were like, it should be a little bit of everything. So it kind of has like old school Roman gladiator games component to it. Right, like, you know, dueling and battling and competing, but it also has like high speed racing, and every match in Ramgod's the name of the sport league, by the way. Right, it's almost like two rams were at the top of a mountain, and you know, they're butting heads kind of thing, and like one of them ultimately gets knocked off the cliff kind of thing. That was kind of like our thought process behind it. But cool. It's got 8 teams in the league, and there's 3 different heats or sort of competition events. There's race, which can be, and the race changes every game, right? So one time it might be like motorcycle, one time it might be like jet skis. It could be just like Formula One cars or a combination like battle.
I think like the Olympics in terms of like how like the point systems work in the Olympics with different competitions, and it's like in total, like that's kind of how we were approaching this.
Yeah. So you have racing, you have combat, which is like, you know, fighting, and that's like generally it could be one-on-one, but then they do like a battle royale WWE style, except that it's, you know, not fake.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
people can die and stuff like that. And then the last one is climb. And that could be like climbing up something, or it could be like descending downward, like a volcano, for example, like an active volcano. So it's like a very dangerous sport. Hence the original title of the series was called Dangerous Games before we pivoted to
It's kind of like, like Ninja Warrior and like how
Yeah.
they do
yeah,
that
Ninja
type of
was a great
stuff.
example.
Like think about like that, We were also big fans growing up of like Global Guts. I know that's like probably a very vintage reference there, but like climbing the aggro crag kind of thing. Like we had
Anyone
that.
listening out there that gets that reference, you're
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
exactly,
I
exactly.
feel like if fans
Relic.
to get to know Owen and Morgan, all they have to do is read Ramgod, and all the things that you both love is going to be incorporated, right?
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
100%. I love it.
So the basic premise of the story is that the league has eight different teams in it, and there's one team in the league called the Barracudas, who are the only team that's not funded by like a big corporation, right? Because it's an expensive league to like keep going, and in order to like to buy all the different cars and vehicles and equipment, the armor and the suits that they wear and things like that, the medical insurance rates, all the stuff. So they the Barracudas are the people's team. They're like the Green Bay Packers, where they're but except that they're funded through crowdsource, like almost like a Patreon type thing, right? But what we learn is that the Barracudas are actually notorious like bank robbers on the side. And that's kind of similar to like the Fast and the Furious or the original Point Break reference that we had used, right? And the league is mandating that for the new upcoming season, every team must bring on one new player to their roster. And so because of that, that's kind of where Clint enters the story. So unlike Fast and the Furious and Point Break, where the cop is like trying to take down the like the bank robbers kind of thing, he has no idea. No one does, except for the tight-knit crew. But when the Barracudas are kind of like huddling up to try to be like, who should we add as the next person? They hear about this other cop that's a former NFL like prospect, superstar athlete that also had some dark ties to his past, where he was like implicated in money laundering and organized crime and stuff like that. So they're like, he could be a good fit. So they ultimately invite him to try us. Now I'm not going to get too far into the series because I don't want to spoil it, but that's like the basic premise of the series. And at its core, though, it's really like a father-son story,
Yeah, I was
because
going to ask about that next with Malcolm.
Clint has this 15-year-old kid, Malcolm, who's a diehard. His favorite sport is Ramgod, and his favorite team is the Barracudas. So ultimately, when his dad kind of gets to an invitation to try out for that team and stuff, like it begins to bring their connection back a little bit. But it's about him learning to become a dad and put his kid first and like reconnect with his kid. And there's a lot of like that element to the story.
Yeah. And I think kind of as we said earlier when we were talking about our own father and like our relationship with our own dad, I mean, like we're very close. We're a very close family, but like we always know that like growing up how important it was to like find things to relate to each other, and our dad specifically, like finding this common ground or these areas of interest that overlapped with his kids. And we kind of wanted to pull that thread as we were writing this, because just from the perspective of being sons, we were like, what was it like for him trying to find common ground to connect with us at an age where we're kind of, you're young adolescent, whatever, young teenager, you're figuring things out in a very weird way, and you're very raw and temperamental. And like, we just kind of wanted, as we said, to pull that thread and really explore that. And that's a huge, element of this series.
Yeah, so a lot of action and then a little bit heartfelt as well. It sounds like it's going to be, right?
Yep. It's got like that. It's got the sport aspect of it, like action. Then it also has like the sort of the bank robber aspect of it outside of things, and it has the the human component of Clint and his son, and then also the other characters in the team on the Barracudas. Like they have one robot. Like every team is required to have one bot and only one bot. At first they were like, the league was like, we'll only put bots in there. But then the fans, like we created a lot of lore behind this and like history of the league. So they tried it with just bots at first, but people didn't care enough because like there was no real risk factor. Nobody cared if a bot got killed or whatever. And then they couldn't only have humans because they needed to be able to create certain events that were just like really extreme, right? And then it also has like this element of like Hunger Games ish and almost like Mario Kart with like the kind of boosts that you can get. Like we worked that into like on the courses. There's like these holographic, like boosts that you can unlock things in your gear, right? So like your gear may come with a jetpack, but you can't actually turn it on unless you get a boost. So when they're in like the climb part of it, if you don't have a boost activated and you were to fall, like and you haven't unlocked the parachute or something like that or the jetpack, like you could die. And that's so the fatality.
Like I said, it's like that Hunger Games like sponsor gift kind of thing. Neat the Mario Kart like question boxes that like almost, and we were like, that would be a cool thing to sprinkle into this new sport.
I mean, there's so many details going into this. You said this is 5 years in the making for Ramgod about?
Yeah, 4 or 5. I'm trying to think. Oh, and you said 2020, but I feel like we started working on it a little bit before that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's 4 years. I don't know. But
between 4 to 5 years,
Yeah. And then as far as the first portion of it, is it going to be like a 4-part series, 5-part series, or is this going to be an ongoing starting in July?
It's a 6-arc miniseries that we have finished. The hope is to continue it going. Yeah, absolutely. Like we've already planned. Like we're big on like developing the series, and we don't think just like short form. It's not an episodic, it's serialized, so it's got an arc, right? Like you wouldn't be able to pick it up in issue 3 and like really know what's going on. Right? It's not an episodic. It's not like a sitcom or something like that where you can like jump in at any like whatever. So or even like a Law and Order where it's like a new case every single time. So it's like it's a nice condensed mini series, 6 arcs, and then it'll come out as a collected trade graphic novel afterwards. And yeah, it's where the goal is to continue it forward. Sorry, I don't know how to turn off my Facebook Messenger thing. That's one of my graphics. I don't know if you guys can even hear it. It's like,
no, I think you can. Yeah.
No, we're good. But yeah, kind of as what Morgan was saying, like we're really big on like world building.
Yeah.
Like first and foremost, like that's like my bread and butter and the thing I love more so. Like Morgan is great with characters and character development, and I like kind of like punch out and do like kind of like bird's eye God's view kind of thing. I'm like, what's the technology they're using? What's like the religion that they practice? What's the clothes they wear? What is the food they eat? What are the vehicles they drive? Like I kind of like just thinking about like worlds in which they inhabit, and that kind of goes back to our other thing about like where we create content and stories in different mediums. And like our whole thing is like when we created Ramgod, we were like, yes, this is going to be a great comic series, graphic novel and whatnot. We were like, we want this also to be able to be expanded and adapted into different mediums and industries because we just see it as, especially with the sport component and whatnot, we were just like, we think you can engage with this type of content and the story in different ways.
Yeah,
so we see it as having a bright future.
Absolutely. I feel like the sport of Ramgod could easily be a role-playing type game as well. And
we were thinking about that as as the next game that we're gonna start working on after Wins it launches. We want to do like a Ramgod board game, and then like maybe even a video game at some point. Like we always write it as like before it's when we're writing the comic series, like we write it in text, like it doesn't just start in artwork. So for me the main difference between like a comic script versus like a TV film script is just the fact that it has panels and it says you're writing out what you're seeing on each page and panel. But if you remove that part of it, like it's just a like a movie or TV film script. So like the Ramgod season 1 could easily turn into a movie or like a season 1 of a TV show too. So that would be cool.
Yeah, and something that's like interesting, at least with Morgan and myself's backgrounds and kind of like the juxtaposition between the two, like I come from video production traditionally. So like I understand like, the visual medium in terms of like what I think most people's like end goal might be, like a commercial or a short film or like something like that. Like how do we actually cast live action actors or do like a motion graphic thing or an animated thing? That was kind of my wheelhouse before I entered this stuff. And Morgan was traditionally coming from comics and graphic novels, both being the managing editor at Heavy Metal, but then also being a co-founder of this company called Hero Projects, which does custom comics for like, music and entertainment professionals and whatnot. So like he was coming from that lens and I was coming from the other lens. And we kind of were like trying to meet in the middle almost, where like I had been dealing with storyboarding for video production stuff. And like when you think about what a storyboard is, it's kind of like a panel of a comic almost. And then Morgan was coming from another angle of like writing and like content creation type stuff. So I don't know, this is a unique thing kind of for us. And it was the first project really that Morgan and I as brothers created together and wrote together, because Morgan traditionally is the guy who's more like the main credit and writer behind a lot of these comics and graphic novels. And this was kind of my first dipping my toes into the creative pond, because as I said, I'm a producer by trade. So I'm used to making other people's creative visions into a reality. And I was kind of neglecting my own creativity for a long time. And then I was like, and as I said, this happened like during COVID and stuff, where I was like, I want to get in touch with my creative side and kind of explore that. Yeah. And then Morgan was great, being my older brother, being like, hey, like, let's foster this. And like, let's kind of figure out a way to really put pen to paper here and give it some legs. And yeah, and I think it was just, we work very well together. So it was just kind of a very great project for a lot of reasons for us.
Yeah, it might even feel a little full circle, right? From childhood. Now you're coming right back to a title that you're both working on and building together. I mean, I would think as brother, I don't have a brother, but I would think if I did, that would feel pretty good to bring something together where you're co-creating and you're bringing all these elements of each of your strengths. I think that would be pretty awesome. It sounds like you've done that a little bit already, but as far as a title where both your names are on it from the same line, I think
we always helped each other. But I think like with Treadwater, like Morgan was really the main creator there, but like I helped with, as I said, other aspects of the story and at Comic Cons and like doing I brought my production kind of and producer acumen into the mix. But this was like the first thing where we were both like co-creators and co-writers on the same thing. So I was acting in a different capacity than I traditionally do. That was more his, his area of comfort and the thing he's best at. But really kind of, and he showed me the ropes, and it was a great learning experience for me. And I really learned to like kind of love and appreciate what he did and the industry in and of itself.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, Tommy, this is our first actual like co-authored title together. We've been working on many different stuff together, but it not from like inception. This is the first one, like from the very initial thought process. The only two creators like on it were just the two of us. So this is like the Brothers Bloom, like Owen Brothers or Duffer Brothers, kind of the Rosenblum Brothers. This is our first one.
That's so cool.
And I'm big on like purpose and like fulfillment and things like that. And I think like for me, at least as I said, coming from production and making other people's creative visions into a reality, I think for a lot of my career, that had felt like as I said, I wasn't tapping into my own creativity in that way. I was just executing others. And like, just because you're good at something doesn't mean that you should do it. And I was good at it, but at the same time, I didn't feel that sense of fulfillment from doing that as I did when I did this. And I tapped into my creativity, and Morgan was really great at pulling that thread and being like, hey, like, let's get in touch with this, expand on this, expand on this, expand on this. And, if you love something, it doesn't even feel like work, So this was a unique experience for me, for sure.
I don't know if it was your website, Owen, but you have this quote from Jessica, and I might butcher her last name, so I apologize. But is it Hish? It's Hischhe. But
yeah.
Here's the quote: "The work that you do while you're procrastinating is probably the work that you should have been doing for the rest of your life." I love that quote. I just think it's so amazing as a creator. Right? A lot of times we're like messing with things on the side, but we have our day job, but you're really passionate about this thing on the side. That's probably the thing you should be doing, because that's where you're going to get release the most energy, right? And probably be the most efficient and the most successful you give yourself to it. And I think it's awesome because I feel like you two are living that out. I don't know if that's a good definition, but man, to grow up with a father that is driving all this amazing fantasy and comics and all this other stuff, and then to be at this stage in your life where you're working together, I feel like that quote has become reality.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you brought that up, because at least as I said, and we're talking about our dad a lot, but that's a really important component for us as creatives. And I think that for the majority of my dad's life, I don't know if he really loved what he did for his career. And he was such a creative person. We always said he like should have been like an English professor almost. He was like very good with like literature and writing and everything. But
for context, he went to MIT, not for science, for creative writing. Like, who goes to MIT for creative writing? But it just shows you that he's like a really smart dude that also had
totally. And like he was drafted in Vietnam and like went there, and it was like that kind of disrupted his collegiate experience. And then he came back. It was like a whole thing. So I think like he really tapped into his creativity when, like telling us bedtime stories almost. And for us, kind of, at least for me growing up and kind of understanding as I got older that maybe my dad didn't love what he did for a living, but he obviously wanted and needed to support his family, so he had to make sacrifices and whatnot. I think Morgan and myself kind of took it upon ourselves. We're big in like big believers in like manifest destiny and things like that, and just like perseverance, and kind of you're only going to get out what you put in. And this is one of those things where we were like, it will only not happen if we give up.
Yeah.
That's the only guarantee that it won't happen if we give up. And I think a lot of people, at least in our micro communities, have been like, the thing we find the most commendable about the two of you is you just keep going. Even if you hear, 50 no's, all you need is one yes. And the biggest difference is from 0 to 1. So we were like, hey, we just got to keep going and keep pushing forward. And eventually, hopefully we'll hit our break. And even if not, we love this. We love what we do. So like, as we said before, it's what you do when you procrastinate was what you should be doing. And we were kind of always just gravitating towards this. So I don't think we'll ever really stop.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. Now,
This is like the
please,
sorry.
Morgan. Yeah, no, please. Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, jumping in on what Owen was just saying, just to add a little to that. Like, we're doing this like full time right now, but it's, we're not, well, hopefully like we're giving this like our best effort right now. We've gone all in, pot committed on like the stuff we're working on, particularly with wins and with Ramgod. And we're really hoping that this summer can sort of prove that it, like, the juice is worth the squeeze kind of thing. Like, because we're always going to want to do this and work on it in our free time, but like to be able to sort of live off of it. Like I would personally, and I think I speak for Owen on this too, much rather make less money doing something that I love, that I get excited. Like I jump out of bed in the morning to work on this stuff. I think I work on the weekends on it. Like my girlfriend is always giving me crap. Like, hey, it's 11 o'clock at night. Coming to bed, I'm like, I'm working. She's like, what are you working on 11 o'clock? You're working on your own stuff. And she's not wrong on that, but it's like, it's not, I mean, yes, there's work to be done on it and it's difficult, but it's still like, I just love this so much.
Yeah.
And I writing, and there's definitely the work aspect of it, like having to understand how to like budget things properly and spend the money that you are using in the right places. But like, this is something that we feel like we found our calling, and that we are like, the more that we've been going in, the more that we're like, it's just ringing true for us. Like this has to be what we do with the rest of our lives. So
Yeah.
we're really hoping that, that this title takes off, and that, the board game we're about to launch on Kickstarter for wins simultaneously also does that. So
Yeah, we're like big, like into like the Kobe Bryant Mamba mentality kind of thing. As we said before, like we're just going to keep pushing forward because we love this, and we need, we just are giving it our all, and we have been. But like really, we're focused in a way we probably have not been in a long time. And as we've been told, we have like a war chest of this, this amazing content that not nearly enough people have seen and judged for themselves whether it's got legs or not. And that's really, I think, more so than anything, what this summer is about. Between the Ramgod release and the Winston Numasera board game, it's really seeing like, hey, do fans kind of mess with this? Do they like it? Are they vibing with it? And like that's what our goal is, because at the end of the day, like we just want to know what fans think of it.
Yeah.
That's
Massive, because Massive so far, like this is the first time like we're actually really working with them one-on-one. Like when we were at Heavy Metal, we were kind of like, there was like the gatekeepers of Heavy Metal that was like keeping us sort of at arm's length from Massive. But now that Heavy Metal is no longer involved in this project at all, and it's just us, the creators, and Massive, seeing like how good they are at marketing and how much they care is just been awesome so far for us. Yeah. And we're really like pumped to be partnering with them. We feel like this is the perfect home for Ramgod, because like they love it as much as we do and want to see it, do well and get into the hands of fans and get the word out on it. So like, even like, they're the reason we're talking with you right now, for example. So like, shout out to Chris Yates and like Michael Calero and Trevor, that whole team over there.
They're so awesome, man. And they just got this young, energetic like vibe about them too. And all the titles that are coming out through Massive are just so unique and different. I personally, as a reader, am a huge fan of everything Massive is doing. So I was really excited when Chris made the introduction with Ramgod and you two gentlemen, because they're not producing bad stuff. So I mean, you got to be really excited that you're working with them from that perspective, because they're really concentrating on things where they think they can make that kind of a connection.
Totally. And I think with them specifically as a publisher, I think they're very future facing
Yes,
in an industry that is very reluctant to evolve in the way that I think it needs to,
absolutely.
especially with like all just the changes and everything from AI to you know what. It's just things are evolving and changing more rapidly than ever before for so many industries. I mean, look at what happened in Hollywood with all the strikes and everything else. Like, there are a lot of disruptors out there now. And I think kind of having a tech somewhat background with whatnot, I think gives them kind of a unique advantage to be able to adapt quickly to a kind of ever changing landscape. And yeah, they're just, as you said, there's like that youthful energy, and it's infectious. And we're very lucky to have them as partners.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like when you were talking about Treadwater and everything that you wanted to accomplish with that, with all these different almost branches coming off of that trunk, whether it's video games, action figures, animated TV, I feel like Ramgod has that kind of ability too. I mean, just from, like you said, the sport aspect of it. But then I'm an action figure guy, so the sports section where they have different motorcycles and different cars or whatever. I don't know what's going to be in it, but I feel like you could go in so many different directions. From, you have the reader aspect of it, they enjoy the comic, but then you have the collector aspect of it, because like Warhammer, for instance, there's people that have never played the board game, but they have thousands of little figures that they're painting at home. I feel like you could kind of do something very
My
similar
dad included, by the way.
What's that?
My dad paints miniatures. Like
Oh,
our dad,
dude,
like
that's so
he's got a ton of them.
Yeah, we're giving a lot of love to Michael on this call, but
Yeah, actually,
Yeah,
on that
yeah.
note, I would just love to just mention our mom for a second, because
Oh,
she was
please.
equally as influential. Just for a second, not to
Yeah.
be too here, but like our dad has always been like more of like the realist to a degree, where it's like as much as he's influenced us creatively, I don't think anyone has supported us from a creative standpoint more than our mom.
True
Like
that,
she
for
has
sure.
like 100% been like, this is your passion. This is what you have to go for this. Do not give up. Where my dad's always like, do you have a fallback plan? What else? What if it doesn't work? What are you going to do? Kind of thing. And
Yeah.
it's just like, so I just want to make sure that like, mom, if you're
Sure.
listening out there,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, no, for sure,
everything that
for
you've
sure.
done to
And
help.
she's a creative too, by the way. She's a textile designer, so
Oh, wow.
you know, we would be
Family
walking
for
around
sure.
the streets of New York, or like France, because we have some French family and whatnot,
Yeah.
and she'd be able to point to someone and be like, "You see what dress that person is wearing? Like that print is my print."
Oh,
She
wow.
designed
So
stuff.
it's just like, if she like creates a watercolor paisley print or whatever, she's like, that would look great on a dress or a skirt or in a shirt, whatever it is. It's just that's her form of creativity and
Well, also,
creativity.
I'm bringing it back to like our genre or like our world. When we
Yeah.
were younger, she's a good artist as well. So she would draw like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for us like all the time, and we'd be like, now do Donatello like with his back up against Michelangelo, and I want him
Yeah.
like holding things. We would art direct her when we were like 7 to draw those things. So, fun.
That's
We were a
awesome.
handful. We were a handful.
Yeah.
Still are.
Yeah.
Still are, right?
You more than I, but yes.
Yeah, valid. Fair.
Fair
Absolutely.
enough.
Yeah.
I think it's so awesome that you two are able to work together on a title like this. Do you find that the graphic novel has become kind of the new pitch deck when you are trying to go to animation or to live action? I feel like a lot of people are coming to comics now just because it's, I think, easier for people who are looking for stories to be able to get through more of your story as opposed to just a pad or a big stack of, all your outlines of whatever you're trying to create.
100%.
Tommy, that's my favorite question that you've asked right
Oh,
now.
cool.
Yeah, Morgan, if you want to go ahead
Just for a second, and pass it to you. Good teamwork, bro.
Yeah.
I love that. Checking in. I think that in general, like when you're making like a new world, like something big, we're not talking about like the Big Bang Theory here, which is like an easy way you could pitch that without needing any comic or like world, like visuals along with that. But when you're creating like, like a Game of Thrones type of thing, or like a Ramgod in this case, right? That is like, it's a unique world. Characters like help me visualize it. Yeah, we can write it out as words, but so a lot of executives, right? Like in the TV and film space, they'll see that as homework. It's much better if you could like hold up a book and then be like, here, and go read it if you want to, because it visually sets the tone for you just by flipping through it. And then selecting pieces out of that. We create pitch decks all the time, and try to make them like almost like mini versions of the comic that just kind of set the world stuff. And then we generally will create like a series Bible type thing. Like this is an example of one we made for Wins. Or we have one for Ramgod as well that we're working on, that sort of like shows you the religion that we created for this, the different territories, the places, the people, the characters. It's like we've now turned this into a kingdom and characters book. But we have the same thing for Ramgod as well. So that like, we are luckily able to be represented by Gotham Group and a management company, and then Gersh Agency as writers and creators in the TV and film space, which was not easy to get, by the way, because like we were, putting ourselves out there, reaching out to people. Hey, do you know anyone that, like that reps creatives and writers for TV and film and stuff? And because we have books that are published, that are available in like Barnes and Noble and Target and comic shops and things like that, it definitely adds a level of credibility to the titles. To where our managers and agents can then go and bring those titles to like a Hulu or a Netflix or like a Bad Robot or like any production company, and pretty much be like, hey, you got to check this out. This might be your next, these guys are next up others kind of thing.
Yeah. And some people might like read Ramgod and be like, hey, like this like kind of reads like almost like a movie or like a TV script, almost like in a way. Like I could imagine that. And like some people might be like, I'm not used to that, or I want it more to read like a comic. But like as I said, for us, and especially with Morgan and myself's creative backgrounds, like we always envision when we create anything, it existing in other mediums, right? So whether it's a board game or a TV show or a film, like our whole thing is like, not to use like a weird industry term, but like transmedia properties. We like to say this franchisable IP kind of thing, because like how did a Game of Thrones get to where it was, or The Witcher, or like anything along those lines, where the lore and the world building is so expansive, and you can engage, as I said earlier in this this interview, is like you can engage with the content in a myriad of ways. And like we don't want to be pigeonholed into just one lane when we create any world and story, because different people are going to vibe with it in different ways and interact with it the exact way that you just said about Warhammer. Like that type of thing is front of mind for us. So we always, when we're creating these things, we're like, yeah, it could exist as a film, it could exist as a video game, as a board game, or as a comic. And as I said,
the cats and stuff like
that. And coming from video production, like I came from the end spectrum, which was like we're casting or we're dealing with animators and motion graphics and doing all types of stuff. And Morgan came from the first part of the process in the comics and graphic novel space. And then you meet in the middle. And as we said, now we're doing a board game, which is kind of in the middle almost. Because
but comics are the lifeblood. Like I want to make sure that I know we talk about like TV shows and stuff, and for the comic fans out there, this is a comic channel, right? And that is the lifeblood of what we create, because we love art, and every single piece of art you see is done by a human being artist. I know Owen was mentioning the future. To be clear, we worship our artists, we cherish them. Every single piece of artwork you see was done by a human artist, and ones that we personally connected with and that we admire and have good relationships with and things like that. So like the core for us is always going to be like the comic. I would say in some cases we might try to within like a different direction, but like whenever we're creating something, from the first thing we do is we like roll through Pinterest and things like that and start putting together like a mood board of things that we're inspired by. And a lot of that stuff is from like other comics and things, concept art that we've seen that we just like, that inspires us and gets us going. And then we start, one thing I love about concept art in general is like when you look at like an image, that it tells us, they always say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Like it really is. You can see something and not know a story behind it, but you're just like, I want to know what that's about. And your brain just starts coming up with stories in your head. So.
I love it because, as fans, we all have different levels of investment that we're willing to make in any given story. And the deeper the story is, the more lore that builds that story. I feel like you could have different levels of fandom depending on how much investment they have. Like it could be timing, it could be a lot of different reasons, but some people want to dive right in and they want to know all the different history of how all these characters, some just want a really good story. And it seems like you've built enough in there to be able to reach all those different fans and all those different investment levels that fans have normally.
Oh, absolutely. From like the world building to like just the cool character archetypes to breaking those archetypes and then creating things that go against them and really
Mhm.
develop the characters. Because I think like, you think about creating a villain or a bad guy, if they see themselves as the bad guy or the villain, and like no villains see themselves that way for the most part. Maybe the Joker, but
Yeah.
that's an anomaly. But everyone else, like even Thanos, we always
Yeah.
talk about this. Like you can understand his rationale. Like you don't need to agree with it, but you're like, well, I get why he was doing that and
Mhm.
why he thinks that he's like the savior and like is the hero in his own story. So that's big for us when we're creating characters, is creating relatable characters that are flawed and kind of get in their own way sometimes. And
Yeah.
that's definitely in Ramgod big time, which is like he's someone that you think is badass and cool, but like he's got a lot of character flaws and things he needs to
Put
work.
yourself in their shoes, see the world through their lens, kind of thing.
Hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. So just to be clear, with Ramgod, July, I believe it should be in your LCS, correct? So you could start asking your LCS for that now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did
Go to
you?
your local comic book stores or I think they just listed it like last week
Yeah.
on Diamond Previews World, which means that it's now like listed as a title that retailers can begin like ordering and going there. So yeah, if you're a comic reader out there and this sounds cool to you, you're like, oh, I want to get Ramgod. Yeah, go to your local comic store and then just tell them that you want it so that they can put in that order for you and make sure that they have
Yeah.
enough in stock. The other cool thing too is like we have a ton of awesome variant covers for issue number one. Like one of the things we love about Massive is that they're all about like they understand collectibles and creating like one of a kind stuff. So they've created like a series of different covers. Well, we created it, like we art directed them, but like they were down to be like, let's get a lot of covers
Yeah.
so that they have different that speak to different aspects of the story. So it's kind of like pick your poison when you're going to get an issue one, like which one do you want, or get them all. I mean,
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. Or get them all.
Or something. So
Yeah.
That's
Also, shout out to our art team, by the way.
yeah, yeah. Let's talk a little bit. I mean, can you kind of mention the rest of the team that's working on
yes,
Ramgod? Yeah.
absolutely. So artist wise, we have Kanan White,
Yeah.
who is our lead sequential artist, right? Did like the layouts, the pencils, and the inks. And then we have Ren Pacheco Spiller, or Renato Pacheco Spiller. We call him Ren Spiller. Ren is absolutely fantastic colorist. I think he said that he used to be like an engineer or like like a rocket scientist, something not comic or art
Yeah.
related, and like decided to do
He fell into it a little bit later in life. He's the real homie.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and like we kind of feel like he's gonna blow up after this
Yeah.
comic, or we probably won't even be able to get him back.
Should. Yeah, he should. He should.
And he
Absolutely
should, like
deserves
he
it.
deserves it.
Yeah.
Kind of similar story almost to like Valentina Tadea, who was our colorist for Winds of Numasera. Like we found her, she was just coming up, and now she's at Disney, and like we back. So, but
Yeah.
Ren is fantastic. Then we also have we've kind
Hendrix.
of we'll get to Henry in a second. But what we kind of did is that we broke the series up into like kind of two parts. There's in season and then there's off season. When I say in season, in Ramgod season. So like there's like just like the NFL or baseball, there's like the off season and the during season. So in order to get the book done in a like a timely fashion, but also make it kind of feel different when you're off season versus in season, we switch artists that go best. So there's two primary artists. There's Kanan White and then there's Henry Persetia, and who like runs issues like 2 through 3 and maybe 4, but issues 1, 5, and 6 are all Kanan. And then we have a separate artist that just does flashbacks, right? That has a
Wow.
total vibe. And that one is like Marco Locati, I think I'm saying that properly, has such a unique style and a really cool color palette that he does. So anytime we get into like a like a flashback,
Because he colors his own sequential line.
yeah, Ren colored like both Kanan and Henry's stuff.
Uh-huh.
Whereas like Marco did everything himself for his flashback, so his flashbacks are like entirely his, which
Yeah.
give like, I think having the same colors for the two different inkers or sequential artists created like the consistency through sort of present day storylines, and then all the flashbacks like being completely different looking. That's intentional.
Yeah.
So that feels pretty cool. And then we have our letterer is Ismail Nahad, Ismail Nahi Nahad. We call him Nahi. We've known him for 12 years, like pretty much since we started Treadwater way back when. He lives in the Maldives. He's phenomenal.
Yeah. He
Graphic
did
design.
he did all of our graphic design forever, and then kind of transitioned into being like a letterer in addition to doing his graphic design stuff. But given kind of Morgan's trajectory into comics and graphic novels and working so closely with Morgan, that they kind of, as they both went in, as Morgan went into comics he went into comics with him
Mhm.
and really took on lettering and is phenomenal at it and like a brother. So
You'll
That's
also see like something else that he does that is really unique. So initially we made all of the page sizing formatted for like magazine sizing, because remember it was supposed to be in Heavy Metal magazine initially, which is a different sizing. It's bigger and it's wider. So but to run it as a comic series, it has to get down. So we didn't want to crop the sides of the artwork at all. That would be terrible. So instead we had to kind of like shrink the artwork slightly and add like, but that created almost like black margins on the top and bottom, which we were looking at that and we're like, that doesn't look right. So Nahi, the genius that he is, created these like special graphics, these story element like which you can probably show this as like an overlay since this isn't live, right? Like you're gonna be whatever.
It's
right
further world, but it's further world.
So one of the things it does is there's like, it's almost like if you had like an augmented reality visor on while you were looking around the world, at the top and bottom of like your viewpoints, there's like scrolling tickers about news updates in the world.
Think like Ready Player One almost.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, that's awesome, man.
So, and it changes page by page. It's not the same one. So it's like it'll, if you're in a dangerous setting, like there's danger related stuff. Sometimes there's like corporate sponsors that this message is brought to you by whatever, but it's all in-world ad stuff.
That's
so it's like
cool.
Not advertising Coca-Cola, it's advertising like, Ram drink or something like that. And then on top of that, we also have these in-world fake ads, which they advertise things that only exist in that world. That's like been a big thing we've been doing since we started with Treadwater 12 years ago, where like throughout, rather than having like an actual ad for like something in real life, their ad only propel the story forward, which are really cool. It's like get a subscription for like Ramgod Plus, which is like the RGSN Plus, which is like their sports network. It's like ESPN, but Ramgod Sports Network.
Yeah, we're basically like in the real world, you can't escape advertising, right? It's everywhere. It's all around us. So we were like, okay, well, like let's take that logic and understanding and just expand our world building and lore by putting like what we call in-world ads or fake ads to expand on our lore within the actual comic and graphic novel itself.
Something so simple could add to the world building, you know what I mean? And really kind of highlight things that maybe you don't have time to tell like a whole.
It's like product placement.
It's cool.
Yeah, it's also so cool. More than that. It's like backstory, I feel like, to the world where you're like, oh, that's cool. Right? Like we have one thing that this was, I think, Kevin or Trevor's idea from Massive, where they were like, it'd be cool. Because we were talking about how all teams were mandated to like add another player to their league. They had the idea of like maybe make one of those fake ads like the memo that goes out to all of the leagues saying, explain an official document, like all teams are now required to add a new player to their rosters, and here's the rules of how it works and stuff like that. We're like, that's cool. It gives it's like doesn't feel forced because it's like it's its own thing that breaks up like like maybe a scene, like it's the divider between ending one scene and starting a new one. So they work as a really cool way to build the lore and pull you into that world.
Yeah, that's so cool. That is so cool. Well, I mean, gentlemen, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you stopping by to talk Ramgod. I'm hoping that you would be willing to jump back on as soon as Ramgod's out. That way people we could get into a little bit more details. I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of really cool Easter eggs as well that we could kind of talk about. And then who knows, once the series is done, maybe you'll be working on other things within this universe for fans to participate in, whether it's a board game, animation, or some of the other stuff that you've been talking about. But that would be phenomenal if you're open to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Massive had mentioned like to us a lot that they like want to do a toy line of this, like an action figure line. So we're like, we want that so bad, and it would be like you said, having the different vehicles and like.
And I want to see it right there.
Yeah, exactly. You definitely will. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Maybe like even like your viewers and fans can like throw into the comments like which characters they would like to see as like the first like figure done kind of.
That would be amazing because I was looking.
We can have like a contest or like a vote on it. Like it's voted by you. You got something like that.
I saw some of the concept art online, and the motorcycles and some of the stuff look phenomenal. So yeah, definitely this would be amazing as action figures and
cover runners.
Yeah.
Cover runner, like it's like a floating motorcycle. Some of them have wheels, but like most of them they kind of just like jet moto style. It's pretty cool.
Exactly.
That's another vintage reference for you. That's a PS1 reference for you.
Yeah, exactly. That's
We're throwing them out. We're throwing them out. We're all about those vintage refs. Those vintage refs. Anyone who knows is watching.
Yeah,
Respect to you. Respect to you.
yeah. Well, Owen Morgan, man, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
you.
Really appreciate it. I cannot wait for Ramgod. What I'll do is below, I'm going to put all the information that you need, all the links to make sure that you go to your LCS, you add that to your pull box, and then also some of the other sites, and obviously your socials. I'll put all that down there too, because if you love comic books, you should definitely be following Morgan and Owen, because I'm sure that you're going to be posting a lot of awesome information about Ramgod and all the other things that you two are working on, respectively. So, man, so excited for Ramgod. I cannot wait to get that in my pull box.
Thank
And
you very
check it out.
much, Tommy.
The
Appreciate it.
art looks phenomenal, by the way. Just some of the little things that I've seen so far is going to blow your mind, man.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah.
I'll take it easy.
Yeah, you too. Thanks again. Appreciate it.